We run an engagement survey at our company, but nothing ever seems to change. What can I be doing to action the survey and move the needle?
Oh my goodness, the engagement survey. I just read a really interesting LinkedIn post on this about how the engagement survey often motivates the wrong things. So it is very top of mind in my head as I think about this. So let me break down a couple things. Number one, just so nobody is confused, I do think it's useful to do engagement surveys. I think it's helpful to be quantitative in how you look at things, and I think it is useful and important to have an opportunity for people to share their thoughts and to express their concerns. I think it's also very, very important to have context of what's going on with the business and what's going on with the workforce, both in the job as well as in the market, as you talk through the engagement survey results and as you think about what it is you're trying to move when you say move the needle. A couple really important things. Historically, I remember early on when these were just getting started and I was at Oracle, somebody pointed out to me something really interesting and useful, that when the stock price was up, the engagement scores were up, and when the stock price was down, the engagement scores were down. And
It's all about the money.
exactly. And so while that was a window into kind of how things worked at Oracle, because there also was a tremendous amount of focus on people's share price versus their paychecks. I think the context still matters. So what is the lived experience for the workforce? That should be your baseline going in, for which you try to understand what they're telling you. Looking at the data without that and trying to move the needle on the data without understanding that is an exercise in frustration, because you don't understand where you're going and what your probability of success is. The second thing I think that people really get fixated on is wanting the scores to be good versus wanting the scores to be helpful. I am a much bigger believer of having the scores give me insights on where I need to expand my curiosity. So instead of looking for yes or no, or good or bad, or red or green in your heat maps, I think you really want to look at what is the overall feeling within the workforce and where are the gaps. And a couple things I would like to remind you. The gaps are almost always about communication. Even the ones that are about essentially compensation are really about communication. Because no matter what, you're working as a leadership team or as a leader within a context for which you have a certain amount of control and you have a certain amount that you don't control. But what's always true is that your inability to communicate with enough empathy and clarity of both what's going on for the business and what the people are needing is what you should be looking to understand in this. So it's not to say that you shouldn't be putting programs in place to try to improve the context and the results, but first and foremost, you should be asking yourself, what have I learned from this that is giving me clues into where my communication is not working, number one. And number two, you should not assume that those answers are the end game. The answers are the beginning of the next level of questions you need to start having. It should be targeting your curiosity and your questioning to the populations that are struggling the most. And so this is where I think you want to put your energy, not on what your scores are as the end game, but what is it that you're learning and how are you going to be able to communicate better as a result of that?
A couple things. So one, you talked about the context, and it made me recall kind of a funny contextual thing from data. So in one of my recent jobs, we had people all over the world, but let's say we had people in the US and we had people in China. And there were like these two questions, and it was like, I am healthy for my age, and I have an appropriate level of stress in my job. And in the US, like everyone was healthy, but did not have an appropriate level of stress. And in China, no one was healthy and everyone had an appropriate level of stress. Anyway, it was just a very interesting, like, cultural difference, right? So the context, not only for the business, you also have to kind of understand the context of the culture, right? And what people's expectations are, right? So people in China were willing to be stressed and willing to not be healthy, I guess. And people in the US were like, oh, I'm healthy, but but even though I'm healthy, it's too much, too stressful. So anyway, it was a very interesting, like, and a survey after survey after survey, it was always like that, no matter what we did, no matter what we changed. And that is really true in terms of what the person asking the question. It is really hard to move the needle, but the most important thing, I think, is to make sure that everybody recognizes that you are listening, that you do care, that you share back what you've learned from the survey, and that you solicit from people, ideas on how to improve. And in this case, what you were saying rings completely true. It's, about the communications. Like, how do we, do we have, different kinds of all hands or skip levels or manager training or, but it can't just be from the top. Everybody needs to kind of come up with solution ideas based on understanding where people are.
But even in the coming up with solution ideas, being really clear that those are the actions you're taking to address these things that you've learned.
Yes.
Because without that, you just are going to spend a lot of money and end up in the exact same place the next year and the next year. Right. And I had somebody say, like, it's for them was inversely correlated. The high performers were unhappy at different times than the low performers. And so, again, digging into the question of what sorts of cohorts are struggling and why would they be struggling? Sometimes the things they're struggling about is exactly what the business needs or what the business is trying to do. And so sometimes in that context, your best move really is more tough love of being clear. I understand this isn't optimized for you specifically, but this is what is optimized for the overall business. This is why, this is what's going to happen. At the end of the day, that may cause that cohort to opt out or to be, unhappy. But again, I think clear is kind. I think being more clear as to what problems you are willing to solve and what problems you are not willing to solve or not able to solve, I think is part of what it means to be a leader.
And I think that there's a real possibility that you're only going to move two numbers. One is, was the survey actioned upon? Did you see clear changes as a result of the survey? And the other one is, I understand what the business is trying to accomplish, and I understand how what I'm doing is connected to that. And those may be the only two things that you're able to move for a while, because everything else takes forever. But those are, I would say that if you can at least change those two things, that is doing a world of good for your people and how they perceive how much you care and how much they are willing to step up for you.
And I would also argue if you're accomplishing those two things, you're learning something in the process as well. So it's good use of your time as well.